Kansas Territory, 1887. The train's whistle pierces the autumn air as Clara Mitchell steps onto the wooden platform at Millbrook Station, her heart hammering against her ribs. In her worn leather satchel lies a single letter bearing the careful script of William Hayes, promising marriage, a home, and a fresh beginning far from Boston's grimy factory districts. Her calloused fingers trace the envelope's edge as she scans the handful of weathered faces gathered near the depot, searching for the kind eyes described in their correspondence. But the platform holds only strangers, and something in their expressions tells her that destiny has prepared a test far beyond anything she imagined when she sold her mother's wedding ring for train fare west. What awaits Clara isn't the quiet ranch life she'd envisioned, but 7 pairs of desperate eyes belonging to children who've already lost too much. What she'll discover will challenge every assumption about family, love, and what it truly means to find your place in this world. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The November wind cut across the Kansas prairie with a sharpness that reminded Clara why she'd left New England, though not in the way she'd expected. Millbrook stretched before her like a child's wooden toy set, a collection of simple buildings, arranged along a single dirt road that seemed to dissolve into endless golden grassland. The grain elevator rose against the pale sky like a cathedral spire, while the water tower cast its long shadow across weathered storefronts that spoke of hard work and harder winters. Clara adjusted her dark blue traveling dress, the finest garment she owned, purchased specifically for this moment when she would meet the man who'd courted her through 6 months of carefully written letters. William Hayes had painted pictures with his words, describing the rolling hills of his ranch, the sturdy farmhouse where she would tend a kitchen garden, and the quiet evenings they would share reading by lamplight. His letters spoke of loneliness, tempered by hope, of a man who'd built something solid and was ready to share it with someone who understood the value of simple contentment. She had written back with equal care, sharing her dreams of escape from the textile mills where lint-filled air burned her lungs and the clatter of machinery drowned out her thoughts. Clara had described her skills with needle and thread, her ability to read and cipher, and her willingness to work alongside a good man, building a life worth living. What she hadn't mentioned was the fire that had claimed her parents and left her with nothing but determination and a small inheritance hidden in her bodice, insurance against a world that had already proven its capacity for sudden devastation. The station master, a bent figure with tobacco-stained whiskers, approached with the deliberate gait of a man delivering unwelcome news. His eyes held the particular combination of pity and discomfort that Clara had seen too often in recent months. The look of someone forced to shatter carefully constructed hopes. "You the Mitchell lady from Boston?" His voice carried the flat vowels of the prairie, weathered by years of wind and distance. "Come about the Hayes place?" Clara straightened her spine, drawing on the composure that had carried her through. Factory supervisors and landlords, and the endless small humiliations of poverty. "I am Clara Mitchell, yes. Mr. Hayes was to meet me here today. Perhaps he's been delayed." The station master removed his cap, running gnarled fingers through thin grey hair. "Miss, I'm afraid there's been development since your last correspondence. William Hayes passed on 3 weeks back. Fever took him quick, along with 2 others in the county. Dr. Coleman did what he could, but sometimes the Lord has other plans." The words struck Clara with the peculiar numbness that accompanies disasters, too large to immediately comprehend. She had traveled 1,500 miles to marry a dead man. The small inheritance sewn into her corset suddenly felt enormous and utterly useless, like carrying water in the desert only to discover you needed bread. "I see," she managed, though she saw nothing clearly. The platform seemed to tilt beneath her feet, and the distant sound of children's voices carried on the wind like mockery. "Then I suppose I should inquire about return passage to Boston." "Well now," the station master said, his weathered face creasing with something that might have been relief. "That might be premature. See, William's situation is what you might call complicated. He left behind considerable complications that need sorting, and there's folks in town who've been hoping someone might step forward to help with the circumstances." Clara felt a familiar stirring of wariness. In her experience, when people spoke of complications and circumstances with such careful delicacy, they were usually preparing to ask for something unreasonable. Still, with nowhere else to go and precious little money for return fare, she found herself listening. "What sort of complications, Mr. Jameson? Otis Jameson?" He resettled his cap with the air of a man gathering courage for an unwelcome task. "William Hayes was a good man, understand, but he had what you might call a soft heart for children in difficult situations. Over the years, he sort of collected youngsters who had nowhere else to go. Not official-like, just took them in when circumstances required. Now he's gone, and there's 7 children at the farmhouse with no proper guardian and winter coming on fast." 7 children. The number sat in Clara's mind like a stone dropped in still water, sending ripples of implication in all directions. She had come west expecting to tend a husband's household, perhaps help raise a child or 2 in time. Instead, she was being presented with an instant family larger than anything she'd imagined in her most ambitious maternal dreams. 7, she repeated, testing the word, and their ages range from little Timmy, who's barely past toddling, up to Emma, who's 14 and been trying to hold things together since William passed. Dr. Coleman's been checking on them, and some of the neighbor women have brought food. But it's not a long-term solution. County officials are talking about splitting them up, sending them to different relatives or institutions where they can be properly cared for. The casual way he spoke of separating the children sparked something fierce in Clara's chest. She had grown up hearing whispered stories of the orphan trains, of siblings torn apart and scattered across the continent like dandelion seeds in a storm. The thought of these 7 children, already bonded by loss and circumstance, being divided among strangers struck her as a cruelty beyond necessity. And if someone were willing to take responsibility for them, she asked carefully, all of them together. Jameson's eyes brightened with hope, so naked it was almost embarrassing. Well, that would solve a considerable problem for everyone involved. The farmhouse is sound, the land's good, and William left enough in savings to get through winter if managed careful-like. Of course, it would take someone with real backbone to handle 7 youngsters, especially with some of them being what you might call challenging in their own ways. Clara stood silently on the platform, feeling the weight of the decision settling around her like a heavy cloak. Behind her lay Boston with its familiar miseries, the boarding house room she could barely afford, the factory work that was slowly killing her lungs, and the endless grey prospect of survival without hope. Ahead lay the unknown farmhouse and 7 children who needed someone foolish enough or brave enough to believe that love could substitute for blood relation. The choice, when it crystallized in her mind, felt less like a decision than like recognition of something that had already been decided by forces beyond her control. She had come west seeking a new life. Perhaps this was simply a different shape than she'd expected. "Mr. Jameson," she said, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice, "I would like to see the children and the property before making any commitments. Could arrangements be made for transportation to the Hayes farm?" The relief that flooded Jameson's weathered features was answer enough. "Dr. Coleman's in town today. I expect he'd be happy to drive you out there, seeing as he's been worrying over those children something fierce since William passed. Good man, the doctor. Young fellow. Came out here from Chicago about 2 years back. He's been trying to figure out some solution for the Hayes situation himself. As if summoned by their conversation, a sturdy black buggy rounded the corner from Main Street, driven by a man who appeared to be in his early 30s. Dr. Henry Coleman had the kind of face that inspired confidence, with steady brown eyes. Behind wire-rimmed spectacles and the calm demeanor of someone accustomed to making life-and-death decisions. His coat was well-tailored but practical, his hands strong and careful as he guided the horse to a stop near the platform. "Miss Mitchell, I presume?" His voice held traces of education and urbanity that marked him as another Easterner seeking opportunity on the frontier. "Otis sent word that you'd arrived on today's train. I'm Henry Coleman, the local physician. I've been helping look after the Hayes children since William's passing." Clara found herself studying his face for signs of judgment or pity, but found only professional concern and what might have been cautious hope. "Dr. Coleman, Mr. Jameson has explained the situation. I understand there are 7 children currently without proper guardianship." "That's correct." Coleman climbed down from his buggy with economical movements, approaching with the measured pace of someone accustomed to delivering difficult news. "They're remarkable children, actually. William did an extraordinary job with them, considering the circumstances. But they need stability, and soon. The county authorities are growing impatient with the temporary arrangements." "I'd like to meet them," Clara said simply. "All of them. Today, if possible." Something shifted in Coleman's expression, a lightening that suggested her response had surprised him in a positive way. "Of course. The drive takes about 30 minutes. I should warn you, though, that the situation is somewhat chaotic. 7 children grieving their guardian, uncertain about their future, trying to maintain a household on their own. It's not exactly a peaceful environment." Clara thought of the textile mill where she'd spent the last 3 years, the deafening clatter of machinery, the oppressive heat, the constant danger of injury from unguarded gears and belts. How much more chaotic could 7 children be? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Doctor, I've survived a tenement fire. Worked 16-hour shifts in a cotton mill and buried both parents before my 21st birthday. I suspect I can handle whatever those children might present." Coleman's response was a smile that transformed his serious features completely. "In that case, Miss Mitchell, I think you and the Hayes children might be exactly what each other needs. Shall we go meet your potential family?" As Clara settled into the buggy beside Dr. Coleman, the reality of what she was contemplating began to sink in. 7 children, 7 individual personalities, histories, needs, and hearts that had already been broken by loss. She had no experience as a mother, no training in education or child rearing, no family of her own to provide guidance or support. What she had was determination, a practical education in survival, and the kind of stubborn hope that had carried her across half a continent on the promise of a better life. The Kansas prairie stretched endlessly around them as they drove toward the Hayes farm. Golden grass bending before the constant wind like ocean waves frozen in amber. In the distance, small homesteads dotted the landscape, each representing someone else's gamble on the future. Someone else's decision to build something meaningful from nothing but land and determination. "Tell me about them," Clara said, as the buggy wheels found their rhythm on the rutted road. "The children. I'd like to know what I'm walking into." Coleman was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts with the precision Clara was beginning to recognize as characteristic. Emma's the eldest at 14. She's essentially been running the household since William fell ill, trying to mother 6 younger children while dealing with her own grief. Remarkable girl, but she's carrying too much responsibility for someone her age. He guided the horse around a particularly deep rut before continuing. Samuel's 12 goes by Sam. He's angry, which is understandable given what he's been through. Lost his mother in childbirth, and now William. He's protective of the younger ones but suspicious of any adult who tries to help. Tests boundaries constantly. Clara nodded, filing away the information. An angry 12-year-old boy could be a formidable challenge or a powerful ally, depending on how the relationship developed. Lucy's 10 came to William after her parents died in a farming accident 2 years ago. She's bright, but hasn't spoken a word since the tragedy. Communicates through gestures and expressions, understands everything, but something about the trauma locked away her voice. The image of a silent child touched something deep in Clara's heart. She had known her own periods of speechlessness. After her parents' death, times when words seemed inadequate to contain the enormity of loss. Then there are the twins, Daniel and David Carter. They're 8, inseparable since their parents died of fever last spring. They refuse to be separated for any reason. Sleep in the same bed, finish each other's sentences when they do speak. William took them in when no other family could be found. Clara found herself smiling at the picture of twin boys determined to face the world together. There was something both heartbreaking and hopeful about children who had learned to depend entirely on each other. Rose Thompson is 6, but she's different. Slower than other children her age, but sweet-natured and affectionate. William found her abandoned at a church in the next county over. Someone had left her with a note saying they couldn't care for her anymore. She loves everyone completely and trusts absolutely. The casual cruelty of abandoning a child, especially one with special needs, made Clara's hands clench into fists. Whatever challenges Rose presented, she deserved better than abandonment. And Timmy's the youngest at 4, William's last biological child. His mother died birthing him, and he's never known any family except William and the other children. He's too young to fully understand what's happened, just knows that Papa William isn't coming home. By the time Coleman finished describing the children, Clara felt overwhelmed not by the practical challenges they represented, but by the enormous weight of their combined losses. 7 children, each carrying grief and uncertainty, looking to adults for security in a world that had already taught them how quickly safety could disappear. And they've been managing on their own for 3 weeks, she asked. Emma's been doing the cooking, such as it is. Sam helps with the heavier chores, feeds the animals, maintains the fire. The twins look after Rose and Timmy, while Lucy helps with whatever she can manage silently. It's remarkable, actually, how they've pulled together. But it's not sustainable long-term, especially with winter approaching. Udin, the Hayes farmhouse, appeared in the distance as they crested a small hill, a 2-story wooden structure that spoke of prosperity and permanence. Smoke rose from the chimney, and Clara could see laundry hanging on a line beside a well-tended vegetable garden. The barn stood solid and well-maintained, with chickens pecking in the yard and a few cows visible in the near pasture. It looked like exactly the kind of place she had imagined when reading William's letters, a home built for a large family and comfortable living. What she hadn't imagined was the cluster of children visible in the yard, ranging from a tall girl hanging laundry to a small boy chasing chickens with delighted squeals. As the buggy approached, they gathered near the house with the wariness of wild creatures, protective instincts honed by loss and uncertainty. Clara's first impression was of how normal they looked. Whatever chaos Dr. Coleman had warned her about, these children appeared clean, reasonably well-dressed, and alert. The eldest girl stepped forward with unconscious authority, shielding the younger ones while assessing the approaching strangers. "That's Emma," Coleman murmured as he brought the buggy to a stop. "She's been the fortress holding everything together." Emma Hayes stood perhaps 5.5 feet tall, with long, brown hair braided severely back and eyes that held too much knowledge for her 14 years. Her dress was simple but clean, her posture erect with responsibility. Behind her, the other children arranged themselves in descending order of size, like nesting dolls prepared for inspection. Clara climbed down from the buggy, acutely aware that the next few minutes would determine the direction of multiple lives. 7 pairs of eyes watched her every movement, measuring her against some internal standard formed by loss and hope in equal measure. "Good afternoon," she said simply, directing her words to Emma while including all the children in her gaze. "I'm Clara Mitchell. Dr. Coleman thought I should meet all of you." Emma's response was carefully polite but guarded. "Good afternoon, Miss Mitchell. I'm Emma Hayes. These are my brothers and sisters." Judy, the way she claimed them all as siblings, regardless of blood relation, told Clara everything she needed to know about the bonds William Hayes had fostered in his unconventional household. "I'm pleased to meet you, Emma. All of you." Clara let her gaze travel slowly across each face, noting the boy, who must be Sam, hovering protectively near a smaller girl who watched with enormous silent eyes. The twins stood hand in hand, mirror images of wariness and curiosity. A little girl with soft features and an open smile waved enthusiastically, while the smallest boy peeked out from behind Emma's skirts. The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken questions and careful assessments. Clara realized that this wasn't simply a matter of her evaluating the children. They were evaluating her with the shrewd judgment of young people who had learned that their survival depended on accurately reading adult intentions. "Would you like to see the house?" Emma asked finally, her tone suggesting this was a test as much as an invitation. Clara accepted Emma's invitation with a nod, following the girl toward the farmhouse, while the other children trailed behind in a careful procession. The porch steps creaked under their feet, but the sound was solid and reassuring, rather than alarming. Someone had swept the boards recently, and autumn leaves had been gathered into neat piles at either end, suggesting that even in their current circumstances, the children maintained basic household order. The front door opened into a spacious parlor that spoke of William Hayes's prosperity and his commitment to creating a proper home for his unconventional family. Wooden floors gleamed with recent polishing, and though the furniture showed signs of heavy use, everything appeared well-maintained and arranged with care. A large stone fireplace dominated one wall, its mantelpiece displaying a collection of carved wooden animals that must have provided countless hours of entertainment for smaller hands. What struck Clara most forcefully was the evidence of children everywhere, but organized children who respected their living space. Boots lined up neatly by the door, coats hanging on pegs at various heights to accommodate different sizes, books stacked carefully on tables, and a basket of mending sitting beside a comfortable chair that must have been William's evening retreat. This wasn't the chaotic disaster she had half expected, but rather a home where multiple personalities coexisted with remarkable harmony. Emma led the tour with obvious pride, pointing out the kitchen with its large wood-burning stove, the pantry stocked with preserved foods and root vegetables, and the dining room with its massive oak table surrounded by 8 chairs of varying sizes. Clara noticed that 7 places were set for the evening meal, each with different dishes that suggested the children had learned to make do with whatever was available while maintaining the dignity of proper table settings. The upstairs revealed bedrooms arranged with practical efficiency. Emma had a small room to herself, reflecting her status as eldest and surrogate mother. Sam shared a larger room with the twins, their beds positioned so the boys could maintain their need for closeness while giving Sam space for his growing independence. Lucy and Rose shared another room, with Lucy's bed positioned near the window where she could watch the sunrise, while Rose's corner was filled with simple wooden toys and a collection of colorful fabric scraps that someone had fashioned into a makeshift doll. Little Timmy's room adjoined Emma's, with the connecting door left open so she could hear if he woke during the night. His space held the remnants of babyhood alongside evidence of a 4-year-old's growing independence. A wooden rocking horse stood beside a small chest, overflowing with carved animals, while clothes were neatly folded in piles that suggested Emma's careful attention to his needs. The final room stood empty, except for a large bed covered with a wedding ring quilt and a dresser topped with carefully arranged personal items. William's room, Clara realized, preserved exactly as he had left it. The children hadn't disturbed anything, creating an unconscious shrine to the man who had given them security and love. Throughout the tour, Clara found herself observing not just the physical space, but the children's interactions with each other and with her presence. Sam maintained his watchful distance, but she caught him straightening items that didn't need straightening, revealing his investment in making a good impression despite his apparent indifference. Lucy moved silently through the rooms, but her expressive eyes missed nothing, and Clara noticed how the younger children automatically included her in their whispered conversations despite her inability to respond verbally. The twins shadowed each other constantly, but Daniel would occasionally step forward to test some small interaction with Clara, while David remained ready to pull his brother back to safety if needed. Rose approached with the fearless affection Emma had mentioned, offering Clara a fabric doll with mismatched button eyes and a smile that radiated pure trust. Timmy alternated between hiding behind Emma's skirts and peeking out with curiosity, clearly torn between natural 4-year-old interest in new people and the security of familiar protection. When they returned to the kitchen, Emma moved with automatic efficiency to begin preparations for the evening meal, and Clara watched the household routine unfold with fascination. Sam brought in firewood without being asked, building up the fire in the stove with practiced competence. Lucy set the table with careful attention to details, ensuring each place setting was perfectly aligned. The twins disappeared briefly and returned with eggs from the chicken coop, while Rose entertained Timmy with a song about autumn leaves that kept him occupied, but not underfoot. The coordination was remarkable, Clara realized. These children had developed systems for managing their household that revealed both William's training and their own adaptation to circumstances. They weren't simply surviving, they were maintaining standards and caring for each other with a maturity that spoke well of their characters and their upbringing. Dr. Coleman had remained quietly in the background during the house tour, but now he stepped forward to help Emma with the heavy pot she was lifting toward the stove. "Miss Mitchell, would you like to stay for supper?" Emma's become quite the accomplished cook, and I think the children would enjoy having a guest at their table. Clara glanced around the room at 7 faces watching her with varying degrees of hope and apprehension. The invitation represented more than a simple meal. It was an opportunity to observe the family dynamics more closely and to let the children become accustomed to her presence without the pressure of immediate decisions about their future. "I would be honored to join you for supper," she said, directing her response to Emma rather than Dr. Coleman. "Is there anything I can do to help with the preparations?" Emma's surprise at being consulted rather than having arrangements made over her head was evident in the way her careful composure softened slightly. "We have everything well in hand, Miss Mitchell, but thank you for asking. It shouldn't be long before we're ready to eat." As if to demonstrate their established routine, the children dispersed to complete their individual contributions to the meal preparation. Sam disappeared outside to tend the animals, ensuring they were fed and secured for the night. The twins began setting out preserves and butter, while Lucy arranged bread slices in a neat basket. Rose helped Timmy wash his hands at the basin, both of them giggling at some private joke that needed no words to be shared. Clara found herself genuinely impressed by the household's efficiency and the obvious affection the children showed for each other. Whatever challenges they might present individually, as a group, they functioned with remarkable harmony. The question that nagged at her was whether introducing an unknown adult into their carefully balanced ecosystem would help or disrupt what they had already achieved. Dr. Coleman seemed to sense her thoughts. "They've done remarkably well," he said quietly, positioning himself so their conversation wouldn't carry to the children. "But Emma's carrying an enormous burden for someone her age, and winter will bring challenges they haven't faced yet. The heating bills alone will be substantial, and there are repairs needed on the barn roof before the serious cold arrives." Clara nodded, filing away the practical concerns alongside her growing emotional investment in these children's welfare. "What happens if no suitable guardian can be found? You mentioned county authorities and institutions." "The county would prefer to place them in established homes, but finding families willing and able to take 7 children together is virtually impossible. More likely, they'd be separated based on age and gender, sent to different orphanages, or placed with relatives who might take 1 or 2 but couldn't manage the entire group." The thought of breaking up this carefully knitted family sent a chill through Clara that had nothing to do with the evening air filtering through the kitchen windows. These children had already lost William. Losing each other would constitute another tragedy entirely. Supper proved to be a revelation in multiple ways. Emma had indeed become an accomplished cook, producing a meal of roasted chicken, root vegetables, fresh bread, and preserved peaches that would have done credit to any farm wife. But more impressive than the food was the dinner conversation, which revealed the children's individual personalities more clearly than the formal introductions had managed. Sam, despite his initial wariness, proved to have a sharp wit and a natural leadership ability that emerged when discussing plans for winterizing the chicken coop. His suggestions were practical and well-reasoned, and Clara noticed how the other children automatically looked to him for guidance on matters requiring physical strength or outdoor knowledge. The twins maintained their remarkable ability to communicate with half sentences and shared glances, but their contributions to the meal conversation revealed distinct personalities beneath their surface similarity. Daniel was more outgoing, eager to share stories about the farm animals and the adventures he and David had discovered in the barn loft. David was more observant, noticing details about their visitors and asking thoughtful questions about Clara's journey from Boston. Lucy's silence became less noticeable as the meal progressed, largely because the other children had developed natural ways of including her in conversations through gestures and expressions. When Emma asked about tomorrow's chores, Lucy pointed to the garden and made motions suggesting the final harvest needed to be completed before frost. When Sam discussed plans for repairing fence posts, Lucy nodded toward the tool shed and held up 3 fingers, apparently indicating the number of posts that needed attention. Rose's constant chatter filled any gaps in conversation, her observations ranging from philosophical insights about why chickens preferred certain nesting boxes to detailed descriptions of the patterns she saw in cloud formations. Her comments revealed a mind that worked differently, but observed the world with unusual intensity and joy. Timmy's contribution consisted mainly of questions delivered with 4-year-old directness. Why did Papa William go away? When is he coming back? Are you going to live here now? His innocent inquiries created moments of uncomfortable silence that the older children had clearly learned to navigate with gentle redirections and distractions. Throughout the meal, Clara found herself studying not just the individual children, but the family dynamics they had created. Emma's authority was acknowledged but not resented, suggesting William had established her role gradually and with the other children's consent. Sam's protective instincts extended to all his siblings, but he seemed particularly attuned to Lucy's needs and Timmy's tendency to wander into potentially dangerous situations. The twins functioned as a unit in most things, but Clara noticed that David often served as Daniel's interpreter for more complex emotional situations, while Daniel took the lead in physical activities and practical planning. Rose's obvious developmental differences didn't prevent her from contributing meaningfully to family discussions, and her siblings included her input with natural ease. Lucy's silence didn't isolate her from the group. Instead, the family had developed communication patterns that honored her choice while ensuring her needs were understood and met. By the time the meal concluded and the evening cleanup began, Clara realized she was witnessing something extraordinary. These weren't simply children thrown together by circumstance and managing to coexist. They were a genuine family bound by choice, affection, and mutual responsibility. William Hayes had somehow created an environment where 7 very different children with varying needs and personalities had learned to function as a cohesive unit. The question now was whether Clara could integrate herself into this existing family structure without disrupting the delicate balance they had achieved, or whether her presence would inevitably alter dynamics that were already working well for the children involved. As Dr. Coleman prepared to drive her back to town for the night, Emma approached with the careful dignity that seemed characteristic of her personality. "Miss Mitchell, we appreciate your visit today. If you decide you might be interested in helping us stay together, we would welcome the opportunity to discuss the practical arrangements." The formal phrasing couldn't disguise the hope in Emma's voice, or the way the other children had gathered nearby to hear Clara's response. 7 pairs of eyes watched her with expressions ranging from Sam's suspicious optimism to Rose's completely trusting smile. Clara felt the weight of their combined expectations settling around her like a mantle of responsibility she wasn't sure she was prepared to carry. But as she looked at their faces, she realized that preparation might be less important than commitment, and that these children needed someone willing to take the risk of loving them more than they needed someone who came with perfect qualifications. "Emma, I think we should definitely discuss practical arrangements," she said carefully. "Dr. Coleman, would it be possible for me to return tomorrow so we can talk about what would be required to make this situation work for everyone?" The relief that flooded Emma's face was matched by the barely contained excitement that rippled through the younger children. Even Sam's expression lightened marginally, though his natural wariness remained evident. "Of course," Dr. Coleman said, his own relief apparent in the way his shoulders relaxed. "I think tomorrow would be perfect for working out the details." As they drove back toward Millbrook in the gathering darkness, Clara found herself mentally cataloging everything she had observed during her visit to the Hayes farm. 7 children, each with distinct needs and personalities, functioning together as a family unit that had somehow survived the loss of their guardian and continued to maintain their household with remarkable competence. The practical challenges were enormous, she acknowledged. Feeding, clothing, and educating 7 children would require resources she wasn't sure she possessed. The emotional challenges might prove even more daunting, as she would need to earn the trust and affection of children who had already learned that adults could disappear without warning. But as the buggy wheels found their rhythm on the rutted road, Clara realized that her decision had already been made, somewhere between watching Emma's careful dignity and experiencing Rose's unreserved trust. These children needed someone willing to commit to keeping their family together, and she needed a purpose larger than simple survival. The next morning brought crystalline air and the kind of brilliant autumn sunshine that made the Kansas prairie look like a golden ocean stretching toward distant horizons. Clara had spent the night at Martha Flynn's boarding house, a comfortable establishment that catered to traveling salesmen and the occasional visitor like herself. Mrs. Flynn proved to be a motherly woman with sharp eyes and a talent for extracting information through seemingly casual conversation. Over breakfast of eggs, bacon, and fresh biscuits, Clara found herself sharing more details about her situation than she had intended. Mrs. Flynn listened with the attention of someone accustomed to hearing travelers' stories, but her questions revealed a genuine interest in Clara's welfare rather than mere curiosity. 7 children is a considerable undertaking for anyone, Mrs. Flynn observed as she refilled Clara's coffee cup. William Hayes was a saint to take on so many, but he had years to adjust to each addition. You'd be stepping into a ready-made family all at once. Clara had been thinking the same thing throughout a largely sleepless night. The children seemed to have adapted well to their circumstances. I suppose the question is whether they can adapt to having an outsider attempt to fill William's role. Not his role exactly, Mrs. Flynn said thoughtfully. You couldn't replace what William meant to those children, and trying would be a mistake. But you could create something new if you're patient enough to let it develop naturally. The wisdom in this observation struck Clara as exactly the perspective she needed. She wasn't being asked to replace William Hayes or to step into a predetermined role. Instead, she had the opportunity to help create something new from the foundation he had established, to become part of the family's evolution rather than a replacement for what they had lost. Dr. Coleman arrived promptly at 9 o'clock, as they had arranged the previous evening. His morning demeanor seemed more optimistic than his careful concern of the day before, and Clara wondered whether he had spent the evening developing his own plans for supporting whatever arrangement they might work out. The drive to the Hayes farm passed quickly, filled with practical discussions about the resources required to maintain the household through winter and beyond. Clara learned that William had left the property free of debt and had maintained a modest savings account that could cover basic expenses for several months if managed carefully. The farm itself was productive enough to provide most of their food requirements, and the income from selling eggs, preserved foods, and Emma's sewing could supplement their cash needs. What they lacked was adult supervision that would satisfy county authorities and community expectations. Clara's presence would legitimize the children's living arrangements and provide the stability required for them to remain together as a family unit. When they arrived at the farmhouse, Clara was struck again by how well-maintained everything appeared, despite the children's young ages and recent loss. Sam was already at work, repairing fence posts with the twins' assistance, while Emma hung laundry on the line with Lucy's silent help. Rose and Timmy played in the yard under Emma's watchful supervision, their laughter carrying on the morning breeze. The scene represented everything Clara had imagined when she dreamed of escaping Boston's industrial grime for the clean simplicity of rural life. But it also represented something more precious than she had dared to hope for, a ready-made family bound together by choice and mutual affection rather than mere blood relation. Emma greeted them with the same careful politeness of the previous day, but Clara sensed a new undercurrent of anticipation in the girl's demeanor. The other children gathered more quickly this time, their initial wariness replaced by curiosity about what this second visit might mean for their future. "Good morning, everyone," Clara said, including all the children in her greeting. "I've spent considerable time thinking about our conversation yesterday, and I have some questions I hope you can help me answer." The formal phrasing seemed to please Emma, who straightened with the dignity of someone being consulted rather than simply informed about decisions made by adults. Even Sam stepped closer, his expression suggesting reluctant interest in what Clara might propose. "First," Clara continued, "I need to understand what each of you would want from a guardian. Not what you think you should want, but what would actually make you feel secure and happy." The question seemed to surprise them, as though the concept of their preferences being solicited was novel. Emma glanced around at her siblings before responding with characteristic thoughtfulness. "We want to stay together," she said simply. "All of us in this house as a family. Everything else we can figure out if we can just stay together." The twins nodded emphatically at this, their usual synchronization extending to their urgent agreement. Lucy pointed to herself and then swept her arm to include all her siblings, her gesture eloquently expressing the same sentiment. Rose clapped, her hands with delight at the idea, while Timmy looked confused but pleased by the general atmosphere of excitement. Sam's response came more slowly, his natural wariness warring with hope. "We want someone who won't try to change everything William built here. Someone who understands that we're already a family and doesn't need to make us into something different." The insight revealed a maturity beyond his 12 years and a protective instinct that Clara recognized as both admirable and potentially challenging. Sam would need to be convinced that any changes she proposed would strengthen rather than undermine the family structure he was determined to preserve. "Those seem like very reasonable expectations," Clara said carefully. "What I need you to understand is that I've never been responsible for 7 children before. I would be learning alongside all of you, and there would probably be mistakes and adjustments as we figure out how to make this work." "William made mistakes too," Emma said quietly, "especially at first, when he wasn't sure how to handle some of our particular needs. But he kept trying, and he listened when we told him something wasn't working." The simple statement revealed both the children's pragmatic understanding of human imperfection and their willingness to work with adults who demonstrated genuine commitment to their welfare. Clara felt a surge of hope that perhaps her inexperience might be less disqualifying than she had feared. "Then let me propose something," she said, gathering her courage for the commitment that would change all their lives. "I would like to become your guardian, legally and practically, with the understanding that we'll build this new family arrangement together. I'll contribute the resources and adult supervision you need, and you'll help me learn how to be the kind of guardian you deserve." The silence that followed her proposal was broken by Rose's delighted squeal and Timmy's excited jumping, but Clara found herself watching the older children for signs of their more considered responses. Emma's face showed relief so profound it was almost painful to witness, while Sam's expression suggested cautious optimism, tempered by his determination to protect his siblings from further disappointment. Lucy approached Clara directly and took her hand, her dark eyes communicating approval more eloquently than words could have managed. The twins exchanged one of their mysterious consultations before Daniel stepped forward as their spokesperson. "We would like that very much," he said, formally, while David nodded solemn agreement. "When would you move in with us?" The practical question reminded Clara that her acceptance of this enormous responsibility would require immediate, concrete steps. She had a train ticket back to Boston, a few belongings at the boarding house, and no clear plan for transforming herself from mill worker to frontier mother of 7. "Well," she said, looking around at their expectant faces, "I suppose we should start by making this arrangement official with the county authorities. Dr. Coleman, what would be required for me to assume legal guardianship?" Coleman had been watching the family dynamics with obvious approval, and his response carried the confidence of someone who had already researched the necessary procedures. "We'll need to file papers with the county clerk, demonstrate that you have the financial means to support the children, and arrange for a home inspection to confirm that the living arrangements are suitable. Given William's reputation and the condition of the property, none of that should present significant obstacles." "How long would the process take?" Emma asked, her practical mind already moving toward the logistics of transition. "A few weeks, probably. But Miss Mitchell could move in immediately on a provisional basis, especially if I provide medical testimony supporting the arrangement." The county authorities are primarily concerned with ensuring the children are properly cared for, and your household management has already demonstrated that's not a problem. Clara felt the enormity of the decisions settling around her like a physical weight. In the space of 24 hours, she had gone from expecting to marry a stranger to proposing to adopt 7 children. The practical challenges were staggering, the emotional risks enormous, and the potential for failure significant. But as she looked at the circle of faces surrounding her, ranging from Emma's mature hope to Timmy's innocent trust, Clara realized that some opportunities were too precious to reject simply because they exceeded her experience or qualifications. These children needed someone willing to commit to their welfare unconditionally, and she needed a purpose worthy of the courage that had carried her across the continent in search of a better life. "Then it's settled," she said, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "Dr. Coleman, let's begin whatever paperwork is required. Children, we're going to need to discuss how to rearrange the household to accommodate everyone's needs. Emma, I'll need your help understanding the routines William established and which ones we should maintain." The transformation from tentative visitor to committed family member happened so quickly that Clara barely had time to process the implications. But as the children began chattering excitedly about practical arrangements and Dr. Coleman outlined the legal requirements they would need to fulfill, she felt a sense of rightness about the decision that transcended her anxieties about the challenges ahead. By evening, Clara had taken up residence in William's former room, which Emma had quietly prepared during the afternoon while the legal discussions continued. The children had reorganized themselves with remarkable efficiency to accommodate their new family member, and dinner conversation buzzed with plans for winterizing the house and discussions of how various household responsibilities might be redistributed. As Clara lay in her new bed that first night, listening to the sounds of 7 children settling into sleep throughout the house, she reflected on the extraordinary turn her life had taken. She had come west, seeking security through marriage, to a stranger, only to find herself committed to the far more complex but infinitely more meaningful task of mothering 7 children who had chosen to trust her with their future. The responsibility was daunting, but for the first time since her parents' death, Clara felt she was exactly where she belonged. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as they worked to formalize their unconventional family arrangement. But tonight, she was simply a woman surrounded by children who had decided she was worthy of their love and trust. Outside, the Kansas wind whispered through the prairie grass with the promise of winter approaching. But inside the Hayes farmhouse, a new family was beginning to take shape from the ashes of loss and the hope of new beginnings. Clara's first week as guardian of the Hayes children passed in a whirlwind of adjustments that tested both her resolve and her stamina. The legal paperwork that Dr. Coleman had assured her would be straightforward proved more complex than anticipated, largely due to the county clerk's unfamiliarity with guardianship arrangements involving 7 children simultaneously. Each child required individual documentation, and the clerk, a meticulous man named Harrison Polk, insisted on verifying every detail of their circumstances before proceeding with the official filings. The process revealed aspects of the children's histories that Clara hadn't fully understood during her initial conversations with them. Emma and Sam's mother had died when Sam was barely walking, leaving William to raise 2 small children while managing his expanding farm. The documentation showed that William had formally adopted both children, giving them legal status as his heirs rather than simply taking them in as temporary wards. Lucy's situation proved more complicated. Her parents had died intestate, and distant relatives in Missouri had shown initial interest in claiming her before deciding they couldn't manage a traumatized child who refused to speak. William's guardianship had been informal, based on community understanding rather than legal documentation. Polk insisted that Clara would need to track down the Missouri relatives and obtain formal relinquishment of any claims before Lucy's guardianship could be transferred. The twins presented their own paperwork challenges. Their parents had been recent immigrants from Ireland, and the documentation of their deaths was incomplete. County records showed that Daniel and David Carter had been left orphaned, but establishing William's legal right to have taken them in required piecing together testimonies from neighbors and Dr. Coleman's medical records from the fever epidemic that had claimed their parents. Rose's abandonment at the church had been handled informally by the pastor, who had simply delivered her to William without involving county authorities. There was no record of her original family name or circumstances, making her legal status particularly precarious. The county would need to declare her officially abandoned before Clara could assume guardianship, a process that could take months if anyone came forward claiming relationship. Timmy's status was the most straightforward, as William's biological son and heir to the property. But even this created complications, as Clara would need to be appointed administrator of his inheritance until he reached majority, requiring additional legal procedures and oversight. Clara found herself spending long hours in the county courthouse, navigating bureaucratic requirements while trying to maintain some semblance of normal household routine for the children. Emma shouldered additional responsibilities with characteristic competence, but Clara could see the strain in the girl's careful composure and her increasingly frequent glances toward the door when Clara's errands kept her away longer than expected. The children's individual reactions to the legal proceedings revealed aspects of their personalities that Clara was still learning to understand. Sam approached the documentation process with suspicious cooperation, clearly understanding that the paperwork was necessary, but resenting the implication that his family's legitimacy required official validation. He answered the clerk's questions with minimal politeness, his body language radiating barely contained irritation at having their private affairs scrutinized by strangers. Emma, by contrast, embraced the legal formalities with relief. For months, she had carried the burden of keeping her family together through informal arrangements and community goodwill. The prospect of official recognition and protection brought visible relaxation to her posture and speech. She organized documents with meticulous care and prepared detailed household accounts to demonstrate their financial stability. Lucy's anxiety about the proceedings manifested in her withdrawal from even non-verbal communication. She stopped making eye contact during conversations about the legal process and began spending long periods sitting quietly in the kitchen, her hands folded in her lap and her gaze fixed on something invisible in the middle distance. Clara realized that the child was terrified that the Missouri relatives might change their minds and demand her return, breaking up the only family she remembered feeling safe with. The twins handled the uncertainty by becoming even more inseparable than usual. They refused to be questioned separately by the clerk, finishing each other's sentences with increased frequency, and developing what appeared to be a private language of gestures and expressions that excluded everyone else. Their anxiety expressed itself in constant motion. They couldn't sit still during the courthouse visits and seemed compelled to maintain physical contact with each other throughout the proceedings. Rose's response to the legal discussions was the most heartbreaking for Clara to witness. The child's natural trust and affection made her incapable of understanding why anyone would question whether she belonged with her family. She approached the courthouse visits as exciting adventures, chattering happily about the important papers that would make Clara officially their mother. Her innocent questions about why the procedures were necessary forced Clara to find explanations that wouldn't damage the child's sense of security. Timmy's 4-year-old understanding of the situation focused entirely on the practical details that affected his daily routine. He wanted to know whether the legal papers would change where he slept, what he ate for breakfast, or whether Clara would still be there to read him stories at bedtime. His concerns were immediate and concrete, untouched by the broader implications that worried his older siblings. The bureaucratic challenges were compounded by community reactions to Clara's sudden appearance and assumption of responsibility for the Hayes children. Millbrook was a small town where everyone knew everyone else's business, and the arrival of a stranger who immediately took charge of 7 orphan children generated intense interest and considerable speculation. Most of the community response was positive, reflecting genuine affection for William Hayes and appreciation for the children he had raised. Martha Flynn proved to be Clara's most vocal supporter, using her position as proprietor of the general store to counter any criticism, with firm reminders of the children's excellent behavior and the obvious improvement in their circumstances since Clara's arrival. Pastor Sullivan offered both spiritual and practical support, visiting the farmhouse regularly to check on the family's welfare and providing character references for the legal proceedings. His sermons began incorporating subtle themes about Christian charity and the many forms that family could take, clearly intended to reinforce community acceptance of Clara's guardianship. Dr. Coleman's support proved invaluable in multiple ways. His medical testimony about the children's physical and emotional health carried significant weight with county authorities, and his professional standing in the community lent legitimacy to Clara's guardianship that her outsider status alone couldn't provide. But beyond the official support, his frequent visits to check on the family's adjustment provided Clara with adult conversation and advice that helped her navigate the overwhelming responsibility she had assumed. However, not all community reactions were supportive. Mrs. Judith Brennan, who operated the town's boarding house and considered herself the guardian of local moral standards, made no secret of her disapproval of the arrangement. She questioned whether a single woman with no family connections in the area could properly supervise 7 children, particularly as they grew older and required more structured guidance. Mrs. Brennan's concerns weren't entirely unreasonable. Clara acknowledged privately. The challenge of raising 7 children alone was daunting under any circumstances, and the specific needs of children who had experienced trauma and loss added layers of complexity that she was still learning to understand. But the boarding house proprietor's criticism seemed motivated less by genuine concern for the children's welfare than by rigid adherence to conventional social arrangements. The opposition crystallized around questions of propriety and long-term planning. How would Clara handle the education of 7 children with different learning needs and abilities? What arrangements would she make for the older children's future prospects, particularly Emma's need for suitable marriage prospects and Sam's requirement for male guidance as he approached adolescence? How could she manage the physical demands of farm life while providing appropriate supervision for children ranging from a preschooler to a teenager? These concerns began to gather momentum when Mrs. Brennan enlisted the support of several other prominent women in town, including the banker's wife and the chairman of the school board. Their informal coalition didn't oppose Clara's guardianship directly, but they raised questions about the long-term wisdom of allowing such an unconventional arrangement to continue without additional oversight or support structures. The pressure came to a head during Clara's second week in Millbrook, when Mrs. Brennan requested a meeting with county authorities to discuss her concerns about the Hayes children's situation. Clara learned about the meeting from Dr. Coleman, who had been asked to attend as a medical witness regarding the children's welfare. "She's calling for a formal review of the guardianship arrangement," he explained during one of his evening visits to the farmhouse. "Nothing directly challenging your authority, but requesting official monitoring to ensure that children's needs are being met appropriately." Clara felt a chill of apprehension that had nothing to do with the October. Evening air filtering through the kitchen windows. What kind of monitoring and what authority would they have to intervene if they decided the arrangement wasn't satisfactory? That's what concerns me, Coleman admitted. Mrs. Brennan has been corresponding with county authorities in other districts, asking about procedures for placing multiple children in institutional care. She's also inquired about the possibility of dividing the children among different families who might be better equipped to handle smaller numbers. The threat of separation hung in the air between them like a physical presence. Clara glanced toward the parlor, where the children were engaged in their evening routines, Emma helping Timmy with a puzzle while Lucy mended a tear in Rose's dress. Sam was reading aloud to the twins from a book about frontier adventures, his voice animated as he brought the characters to life. The scene represented everything she had come to treasure about their unconventional family, and the thought of bureaucratic intervention threatening their harmony filled her with protective fury. "What can we do to prevent that?" she asked, forcing her voice to remain calm despite her inner turmoil. Coleman's response revealed that he had already been developing strategies to counter Mrs. Brennan's challenge. "We need to demonstrate that the current arrangement is not only working, but providing benefits that alternative placements couldn't match. The county's primary concern is the children's welfare, so we need to document their progress and stability since your arrival." Over the following days, Clara threw herself into creating evidence of her family's success with the same determination she had once applied to surviving factory work. She documented each child's educational progress, working with Emma to establish formal lessons for the younger children while arranging for Sam and the twins to attend the town school when it resumed session after harvest season. Emma's natural teaching abilities emerged as she helped design curriculum appropriate for each child's learning level. Lucy's inability to speak didn't prevent her from excelling at written work, and her mathematical skills proved surprisingly advanced. Rose's learning challenges required creative approaches, but her memory for stories and songs revealed intelligence that conventional assessments might miss. Timmy's 4-year-old curiosity provided endless opportunities for informal education. Through daily farm activities, Clara also began documenting the household's financial stability and management efficiency. William's savings, combined with income from the farm's production and Emma's sewing commissions, provided adequate resources for the family's needs. Clara's own small inheritance, carefully managed, could supplement their income during lean periods and provide for unexpected expenses. But beyond the practical documentation, Clara realized that the strongest argument for keeping her family together lay in the emotional bonds that continued to strengthen with each passing day. The children's individual personalities were flourishing under the security of knowing they would remain together, and their collective resilience was enabling them to process their grief over William's loss while embracing the possibility of new happiness. Sam's protective instincts had gradually extended to include Clara in his sphere of concern. She noticed him checking to ensure she had eaten during busy days, and he began volunteering information about which neighbors could be trusted with requests for assistance. His natural leadership abilities were developing in positive directions as he learned to channel his protective energy into constructive contributions to the family's welfare. Emma's burden of premature responsibility was lightening as Clara assumed the adult duties that the girl had been carrying alone. The change was visible in Emma's posture and expression as the constant tension of being responsible for 6 younger siblings gradually relaxed into the more natural concerns of a 14-year-old girl. She began spending time on activities appropriate to her age, reading novels borrowed from Dr. Coleman and experimenting with hairstyles copied from magazine illustrations. Lucy's gradual emergence from the protective silence that had characterized her communication since her parents' death represented perhaps the most encouraging development. While she still didn't speak aloud, her willingness to communicate through gestures and expressions had expanded dramatically. She began initiating interactions with Clara, bringing her small gifts from the garden or offering to help with household tasks that required her particular skills. The twins were developing individual identities while maintaining their essential connection to each other. Daniel's natural curiosity was leading him toward interests in mechanical devices and farm equipment, while David's observational skills made him the family's unofficial weather predictor and animal behaviorist. Their shared experiences were expanding to include separate friendships and individual accomplishments that enriched rather than threatened their bond. Rosie's innocent trust and affection had become a source of daily joy for the entire family. Her developmental challenges didn't prevent her from contributing meaningfully to household activities, and her unique perspective often provided insights that more conventional thinking might miss. Her constant songs and stories created an atmosphere of cheerfulness that helped the family maintain optimism during difficult moments. Timmy's adjustment to Clara's presence had been remarkably smooth, suggesting a resilience that spoke well for his emotional development despite the early loss of both parents. His 4-year-old concerns centered on immediate security rather than long-term arrangements, and Clara's consistent presence and affection were providing the stability he needed to continue his normal developmental progress. The children's collective response to the threat of Mrs. Brennan's interference revealed the depth of their commitment to remaining together as a family. When Clara explained the situation in terms they could understand, their reaction was immediate and unified determination to demonstrate their success as a family unit. Emma took charge of organizing evidence of their household management and educational progress, creating detailed schedules and records that would satisfy any official inquiry. Sam appointed himself the family's spokesperson for interactions with community members, practicing responses to potential questions about their living arrangements. The twins began a campaign of exemplary behavior during their appearances in town, clearly understanding that their conduct reflected on the family's stability. Lucy's contribution was typically thoughtful and effective. She began creating detailed drawings that illustrated the family's daily routines and activities, providing visual evidence of their organized and caring environment. Her artistic abilities, which had previously been expressed only privately, became a powerful tool for demonstrating the family's emotional health and creative development. Rose approached the challenge with characteristic directness, informing everyone she met that Clara was the best mother any children could want and that their family was perfectly happy together. Her innocent testimonials, delivered with complete sincerity, proved remarkably effective at countering suggestions that the arrangement might be harmful to the children's development. Even Timmy contributed to the family's defense by displaying the kind of secure, cheerful behavior that clearly indicated a child receiving appropriate care and attention. His obvious affection for Clara and his comfortable integration into the family's routines provided compelling evidence that the arrangement was meeting his developmental needs. As the date for Mrs. Brennan's formal review approached, Clara felt increasingly confident that her family could demonstrate their success to any reasonable observer. The children's progress since her arrival was undeniable, and their happiness together was evident to anyone who spent time in their company. But she also understood that bureaucratic decisions weren't always based on reasonable observations, and that the threat of separation would continue to hang over their family until they could achieve more permanent legal protections. The guardianship papers were still working their way through county processes, and Mrs. Brennan's intervention could potentially delay or complicate their finalization. The night before the scheduled review, Clara found herself unable to sleep, despite the physical exhaustion that usually followed her busy days. She walked quietly through the house, checking on each sleeping child and reflecting on how profoundly her life had changed in just a few weeks. In Emma's room, she saw the relaxed posture of a girl who was finally able to sleep without worrying about her siblings' welfare. Sam's face in sleep showed the peaceful expression of a boy who was learning to trust adults again. The twins slept curled together but not clinging, their security allowing for individual space within their shared bond. Lucy's room was decorated with the drawings she had been creating, visual stories of family activities and celebrations that spoke more eloquently than any formal testimony about the child's emotional state. Rose slept surrounded by her collection of fabric dolls and wooden animals, her face wearing the serene smile of complete contentment. Timmy's peaceful slumber was punctuated by soft murmurs about farm animals and bedtime stories, the content sounds of a secure child. Standing in the hallway of the farmhouse that had become her home, Clara felt the full weight of her commitment to these 7 children and the responsibility she had assumed for their future. The challenges ahead remained daunting, but her resolve to protect their family had only strengthened with each day of shared experience. Tomorrow would bring the formal review that could determine whether they would be allowed to continue building their life together or whether bureaucratic intervention would shatter the bonds they had worked so hard to establish. But tonight, Clara was simply a mother watching over her sleeping children, determined to defend their happiness against any threat that might emerge. The morning of the review dawned clear and cold, with frost covering the farmhouse windows, and the kind of brilliant sunshine that made everything appear sharper and more defined. Clara dressed in her best blue dress and arranged her hair with particular care, understanding that appearances would influence the officials' perception of her competence and respectability. The children approached the day with a mixture of nervous excitement and determined confidence. Emma had prepared detailed documentation of their household routines and educational activities, while Sam rehearsed the speech he planned to deliver about their family's success. The twins practiced answering questions about their living arrangements, and Lucy arranged her drawings to tell the story of their daily life. Rose insisted on wearing her best dress and bringing her favorite doll to show the important visitors, while Timmy prepared by cleaning his collection of wooden animals and practicing the song he wanted to sing about how much he loved his family. Their individual preparations revealed both their anxiety about the proceedings and their absolute determination to demonstrate their happiness together. Dr. Coleman arrived early to provide moral support and professional testimony, bringing with him Pastor Sullivan and Martha Flynn as character witnesses. Their presence reminded Clara that while Mrs. Brennan had organized opposition to her guardianship, significant segments of the community supported her family's right to remain together. As the county official's carriage appeared on the horizon, approaching the farmhouse through the golden autumn morning, Clara gathered her 7 children around her and felt the fierce protective love that had transformed her from a desperate mail-order bride into a determined mother. Whatever challenges the day might bring, they would face them together as a family, united by choice and strengthened by love. The formal review would test not only Clara's qualifications as a guardian, but the entire community's willingness to embrace an unconventional family that challenged traditional assumptions about how children should be raised and what constituted appropriate care. The outcome would determine whether 7 children who had already lost too much would be allowed to keep the family they had chosen, or whether bureaucratic concerns would force another devastating separation. But as Clara looked at the faces surrounding her, ranging from Emma's mature determination to Timmy's innocent trust, she felt confident that anyone who took the time to truly observe their family would see what she saw: 7 children and one women who had found in each other exactly what they needed to heal from loss and build a future filled with hope and love. The county officials arrived at precisely 10 o'clock, their black carriage cutting a formal silhouette against the prairie landscape. Clara watched from the farmhouse window as three men in dark suits climbed down from the vehicle, their movements deliberate and official. County Clerk Harrison Polk led the delegation, flanked by Judge Morrison from the district court and a younger man Clara didn't recognize, carrying a leather satchel that suggested his role as official recorder of the proceedings. Mrs. Brennan's carriage followed closely behind, bringing the boarding house proprietor along with two other prominent town women who had aligned themselves with her concerns about the Hayes family situation. Their arrival transformed what Clara had hoped might be an informal assessment into something resembling a formal hearing, complete with opposing sides and official testimony. Dr. Coleman positioned himself strategically near the front door, ready to provide both moral support and professional testimony about the children's welfare. Pastor Sullivan had brought several congregation members who could speak to the family's integration into the community, while Martha Flynn arrived with a basket of fresh baking that served the dual purpose of demonstrating neighborly support and providing refreshments for what promised to be a lengthy proceeding. Clara gathered her 7 children in the front parlor, their nervous energy barely contained despite their careful preparations for this moment. Emma stood slightly apart from the others, her documentation organized in neat folders that represented weeks of meticulous record-keeping. Sam positioned himself protectively near the younger children, his jaw set with determination to defend his family against any threat. The twins flanked Lucy, whose silence seemed more pronounced than usual in the face of official scrutiny, while Rose clutched her favorite doll and Timmy pressed close to Clara's side. Judge Morrison proved to be a stern-faced man in his 50s, with gray whiskers and the kind of penetrating gaze that suggested extensive experience in evaluating human character and circumstances. His introduction was formal, but not unkind, acknowledging both Clara's presence and the children's obvious anxiety about the proceedings. Miss Mitchell, we're here today to assess the current guardianship arrangement and ensure that these children's welfare is being properly protected, he began, his voice carrying the authority of legal office. Mrs. Brennan has raised concerns about the long-term viability of this situation, and the county has a responsibility to investigate any questions regarding child welfare. Clara straightened her spine, drawing on every ounce of composure she possessed. Your Honor, I welcome your investigation. These children and I have nothing to hide, and I believe you'll find that our family arrangement is not only working well, but providing benefits that alternative placements couldn't match. Mrs. Brennan stepped forward with the confidence of someone certain of her moral authority. Judge Morrison, while I don't question Miss Mitchell's good intentions, we must consider the practical realities of one unmarried woman attempting to raise 7 children without family support or community oversight. The children deserve stability and proper guidance that this arrangement simply cannot provide long-term. The accusation stung, particularly because Clara recognized the partial truth within it. She was indeed alone in this enormous responsibility, without family connections or extensive experience in child rearing. But she also knew that the bonds she had formed with these children and the progress they had made together represented something valuable that couldn't be measured solely by conventional standards. Emma stepped forward with the dignity that had characterized her approach to family crises since William's death. Your Honor, may I speak on behalf of my brothers and sisters? Her request surprised the officials, who clearly hadn't expected to hear directly from the children during their assessment. Judge Morrison studied Emma's composed demeanor and nodded slowly. Young lady, I'd be interested in your perspective on the current situation. Emma moved to the center of the room, her documentation folder held carefully in her hands. My name is Emma Hayes, and I'm 14 years old. For 3 weeks after Papa William died, I tried to keep our family together by myself. I cooked our meals, managed our household budget, supervised my younger siblings' education, and attempted to maintain the farm operations that provide our income. She paused, letting the enormity of those responsibilities sink in before continuing. I failed at most of those tasks, Your Honor. Not because I wasn't trying, but because no 14-year-old should carry such burdens alone. When Miss Mitchell arrived and offered to become our guardian, I felt relief for the first time since Papa William's death. The judge's expression softened slightly as he recognized the maturity in Emma's testimony. And how has the arrangement worked in practice, Miss Hayes? Emma opened her folder, revealing weeks of careful documentation. Miss Mitchell doesn't try to replace Papa William or pretend that our family situation is conventional. Instead, she helps us maintain the household systems that were already working while providing the adult supervision and guidance we need. She's learning our individual needs and helping us grow as people while keeping us together as a family. She handed the judge a detailed schedule showing how educational responsibilities were distributed among family members, how household chores were assigned based on age and ability, and how their financial resources were managed to ensure stability. The documentation revealed a level of organization that impressed even Clara, who hadn't realized how thoroughly Emma had been recording their daily routines. Sam stepped forward as Emma concluded her presentation. Your Honor, I'd like to add something to my sister's testimony. His voice carried the edge of controlled anger that Clara had learned to recognize as his response to perceived threats to his family's security. I'm 12 years old, and I've lived through my mother's death, Papa William's death, and now the possibility that county officials might decide our family isn't good enough to stay together. What I want you to understand is that Miss Mitchell didn't just solve our practical problems, she gave us permission to be children again. The insight was so profound that it took Clara's breath away. She hadn't consciously set out to restore their childhood, but Sam's observation made her realize that this was exactly what had happened. By assuming adult responsibilities, she had freed the children to engage in age-appropriate activities and concerns. Before Miss Mitchell arrived, Emma was trying to be a mother to 6 children while grieving the loss of our father. I was attempting to manage farm operations and protect everyone from dangers I barely understood. The twins were so scared of being separated that they wouldn't let each other out of sight. Now we can focus on school and chores, a normal growing up, because we have an adult who's committed to keeping us together. Judge Morrison made notes throughout Sam's testimony, his expression thoughtful rather than dismissive. Clara realized that the children's ability to articulate their experiences was providing more compelling evidence than any adult testimony could offer. The twins approached together, with Daniel serving as their spokesperson, while David nodded support for every statement. We want to tell you about feeling safe, Daniel began, his 8-year-old voice clear and confident. Before Miss Mitchell came, David and I were scared all the time that someone would decide we were too much trouble and send us away. We tried to be invisible so nobody would notice we were extra children who didn't really belong anywhere. David stepped closer to his brother, their habitual unity evident even in this formal setting. Now we don't have to be invisible anymore. Miss Mitchell helps us with arithmetic and reads us stories and remembers that I like butter on my bread, while Daniel doesn't. She knows we're different people even though we're twins, and she doesn't try to separate us because she understands that we need each other. Lucy's contribution came in the form of her artistic documentation, a series of drawings that depicted family activities and daily routines with remarkable detail and obvious affection. She approached Judge Morrison directly, offering her artwork with shy determination. Her pictures showed Clara helping with household tasks, reading bedtime stories, working in the garden with the children, and participating in the kind of ordinary family moments that defined their life together. The drawings spoke more eloquently than words about the emotional atmosphere in the Hayes household. Every image radiated warmth and security, depicting a family engaged in meaningful activities and genuine affection. Lucy's artistic perspective revealed details about their relationships that formal testimony might miss, showing how Clara had integrated herself into their existing family structure, rather than imposing foreign arrangements. Rose approached the proceedings with characteristic directness, addressing Judge Morrison as though he were a neighbor she was introducing to her family. "This is my Mama Clara," she announced, taking Clara's hand with complete confidence. "She makes the best pancakes and knows all the songs about farm animals and helps me button my dress when the buttons are tricky." Her innocent testimony continued with a detailed account of how Clara had learned each child's preferences and needs, from Timmy's favorite bedtime stories to Emma's interest in advanced arithmetic. Rose's developmental challenges didn't prevent her from providing compelling evidence about the quality of care and attention she received, delivered with the kind of unself-conscious honesty that no adult testimony could match. Timmy's contribution was equally powerful in its simplicity. When Judge Morrison asked him about his daily routine, the 4-year-old launched into an enthusiastic description of morning chores, afternoon lessons, and evening stories that painted a picture of structured, nurturing care. His obvious security and happiness provided clear evidence that his developmental needs were being met appropriately. Dr. Coleman's professional testimony reinforced the children's personal accounts with medical documentation of their physical and emotional progress. Since Clara's arrival, "Your Honor, I've been monitoring this family's welfare since William Hayes's death, and I can attest that the children's health and development have improved markedly under Miss Mitchell's care. Their emotional resilience, educational progress, and social integration all demonstrate that this arrangement is serving their best interests." He produced medical records showing that the children's anxiety levels had decreased, their sleep patterns had normalized, and their general health indicators had improved since Clara assumed guardianship. The documentation provided objective evidence supporting the subjective testimony about their happiness and security. Pastor Sullivan added spiritual and community perspective to the assessment, describing how the Hayes family had maintained their involvement in church activities and community events despite their unconventional structure. "This family contributes positively to our community while maintaining the values and behaviors that William Hayes instilled in these children. Miss Mitchell has honored his legacy while adding her own strengths to their household." Martha Flynn's testimony focused on practical observations about the family's integration into daily community life. "I see these children several times a week when they come to the store for supplies. They're well-behaved, appropriately supervised, and clearly happy. Miss Mitchell manages their household budget responsibly and ensures they have everything they need for proper development." Mrs. Brennan's counter-testimony attempted to focus attention on potential future challenges rather than current success. "While I acknowledge that the immediate arrangement appears to be functioning adequately, we must consider long-term implications. What happens as these children reach adolescence and require more specialized guidance? How will Miss Mitchell handle the financial pressures of supporting 7 children through educational and career preparation? What provisions exist for her own future security if she dedicates her prime years to raising other people's children?" The questions weren't unreasonable, Clara acknowledged privately, but they seemed to assume that conventional family arrangements automatically provided better solutions to these challenges. Mrs. Brennan raises valid concerns about the future, Clara responded carefully, but I believe those challenges exist in every family situation, conventional or otherwise. What I can offer is commitment to growing and adapting with these children's needs while maintaining the family bonds that provide their emotional security. Judge Morrison's questions became more specific as the hearing progressed, focusing on practical details about educational arrangements, financial planning, and emergency preparations. Clara found herself drawing on weeks of careful preparation as she outlined the systems she had developed for managing the household's complex needs. Emma's documentation proved invaluable in demonstrating the family's organizational capacity and forward planning. The schedules, budgets, and progress records she had maintained provided concrete evidence that the household was being managed with appropriate attention to both immediate needs and long-term goals. The turning point in the proceedings came when Judge Morrison asked the children directly whether they wanted to remain together under Clara's guardianship or whether they would prefer alternative arrangements that might provide more conventional family structures. The question hung in the air like a physical presence, and Clara felt her heart stop as she waited for their responses. Emma answered first, her voice steady with conviction. "Your Honor, Miss Mitchell didn't just rescue us from an impossible situation. She gave us the chance to remain a family while healing from our losses and growing into the people Papa William wanted us to become. I can't imagine any alternative arrangement that would serve our needs better." Sam's response was equally firm. "We've already lost too much, Your Honor. Our parents, Papa William, and nearly each other when we couldn't manage alone. Miss Mitchell kept us together when everyone else was talking about splitting us up. That's worth more than any theoretical advantages other arrangements might offer." The younger children's agreement was unanimous and emphatic, delivered with the kind of emotional honesty that left no doubt about their feelings. Lucy nodded vigorous support while pointing to her drawings that depicted their happy family life. The twins spoke in unison about their determination to stay together, while Rose announced that Clara was the best mama any children could want. Timmy's contribution was a spontaneous hug around Clara's waist that spoke more eloquently than any formal testimony. Judge Morrison retired with the other officials for private deliberation while the families and community members waited in tense silence. Clara found herself surrounded by her 7 children, their collective anxiety palpable despite their confidence in the testimony they had provided. The next few minutes would determine whether they would be allowed to continue building their unconventional family or whether bureaucratic intervention would force the separations they all dreaded. When the officials returned, Judge Morrison's expression was solemn but not unsympathetic. After careful consideration of all testimony and evidence presented today, this court finds that the current guardianship arrangement serves the best interests of all 7 children involved. Miss Mitchell's guardianship will be confirmed and formalized through proper legal channels. The relief that flooded through Clara was so intense it left her momentarily dizzy. Around her, the children erupted in subdued celebration. Their joy tempered by the formal setting, but clearly visible in their faces and posture. Emma's careful composure finally cracked as tears of relief began flowing down her cheeks. Sam's protective stance relaxed for the first time in weeks, while the twins grabbed each other in a fierce hug that spoke to their terror of separation. Judge Morrison continued with practical instructions about ongoing requirements and periodic reviews, but Clara barely heard the details through her overwhelming gratitude that their family would remain intact. The legal victory represented more than bureaucratic approval. It was official recognition that love and commitment could create legitimate families regardless of conventional structures. Mrs. Brennan's disappointment was evident in her rigid posture and tight-lipped expression, but she accepted the decision with grudging grace. Her concerns had been genuine, even if Clara disagreed with her conclusions, and the hearing had provided valuable validation that their family arrangement could withstand external scrutiny. As the officials departed and community members offered congratulations, Clara found herself reflecting on the extraordinary journey that had brought her from desperate mail-order bride to legally recognized mother of 7 children. The transformation had required courage she hadn't known she possessed, and revealed strengths that her previous circumstances had never demanded. Dr. Coleman lingered after the other visitors departed, sharing Clara's relief at the successful outcome while discussing practical next steps for finalizing the legal arrangements. "You've accomplished something remarkable here," he observed, watching the children return to their normal activities with obvious joy at the resolution of their uncertain status. "We've accomplished something remarkable," Clara corrected gently. "These children taught me what family really means, while allowing me to provide what they needed to heal and grow. The success belongs to all of us." As evening fell and the household settled into its familiar routines, Clara stood in the kitchen preparing dinner while listening to the sounds of her children engaged in homework, chores, and play throughout. The farmhouse. Emma was helping Timmy with letter recognition at the dining room table, while Sam read aloud to the twins from their shared adventure book. Lucy worked quietly on a new drawing that appeared to depict the day's successful hearing, and Rose entertained herself by teaching songs to her collection of dolls. The scene represented everything Clara had unknowingly been seeking when she boarded the train in Boston so many weeks ago. Not the quiet ranch life she had imagined as a mail-order bride, but something far more meaningful, a family bound together by choice and strengthened by shared challenges overcome through mutual commitment. Winter was approaching rapidly across the Kansas prairie, bringing the harsh weather that would test their household's resourcefulness and resilience. But Clara faced the coming challenges with confidence born of experience rather than naive optimism. Together, she and her 7 children had proven they could handle whatever circumstances might demand while maintaining the love and security that defined their unconventional family. The mail-order bride who had arrived in Millbrook expecting to marry a stranger had instead discovered 7 children who needed exactly what she had to offer: courage, determination, and an infinite capacity for love that had been waiting for the right opportunity to flourish. In accepting the enormous responsibility of their care, Clara had found not burden, but blessing, not obligation, but joy, and not mere survival, but a future filled with hope and endless possibility. As she called her family to dinner and watched them gather around the large oak table that William Hayes had built for the children he loved, Clara smiled at the recognition that sometimes life's greatest gifts arrive disguised as impossible challenges. 7 pairs of eyes looked to her with trust, affection, and the secure knowledge that their family would endure whatever tests the future might bring. The woman who had come west seeking security through marriage to a stranger had instead found something immeasurably more valuable: a family created through choice rather than circumstance, bound together by love rather than obligation, and strengthened by the daily commitment to honor both individual needs and collective welfare. In becoming the mother these 7 children had wished for, Clara Mitchell Hayes had discovered the person she had always been meant to become. The bitter Kansas winter of 1887 descended upon the Hayes farmstead with a ferocity that tested every aspect of Clara's newfound family in ways the county officials' scrutiny never could. The first blizzard arrived in late November, transforming the golden prairie into an endless expanse of white that isolated the farmhouse for nearly a week. Snow drifted against the windows until only the upper panes let in light, and the wind, howled with such intensity that conversation required raised voices even inside the solidly built house. Clara discovered that managing 7 children during a prairie blizzard required skills no amount of preparation could have provided. The enforced confinement transformed their spacious farmhouse into something resembling a ship's cabin, where every personality trait became magnified and every minor disagreement threatened to escalate into major conflict. Sam's restless energy, normally channeled into outdoor chores and physical activities, manifested as impatience with his younger siblings' noise and constant motion. Emma's careful organization skills became almost obsessive as she tried to maintain order in increasingly chaotic circumstances. The twins, Daniel and David, reacted to the confinement by reverting to behaviors they had outgrown, becoming more inseparable than ever and developing new rituals that had to be performed in perfect synchronization. Their need for identical treatment extended to everything from the number of biscuits on their plates to the precise arrangement of their bedtime belongings. Lucy's silence, which had been gradually softening during the autumn months, deepened again as the isolation reminded her of the helpless period following her parents' death. Rose responded to the storm with typical unpredictability, alternating between periods of excited energy when she would race through the house singing made-up songs about snow fairies and episodes of profound melancholy when she would sit staring out the window with tears streaming down her face for reasons she couldn't articulate. Timmy, at 4 years old, found the enforced indoor time alternately thrilling and terrifying, delighting in the adventure of being snowbound while simultaneously developing night terrors about being trapped forever. Clara found herself drawing on reserves of patience and creativity she hadn't known she possessed. The daily routines that had worked so well during milder weather proved inadequate for the psychological pressures of isolation and confinement. She reorganized their living space to create distinct areas for different activities, establishing quiet corners for individual pursuits and larger spaces for group activities. The kitchen table became a dedicated schoolroom during morning hours, transformed into a craft workspace in the afternoons, and cleared for family games and storytelling in the evenings. Educational activities took on new importance as a way to structure time and maintain mental stimulation. Clara worked with Emma to develop lesson plans that could accommodate all 7 children simultaneously, creating projects that allowed for different skill levels while maintaining group participation. They read aloud from every book in the house, sometimes twice, and began creating their own stories that incorporated each child's interests and experiences. The twins proved surprisingly gifted at collaborative storytelling, creating elaborate adventures featuring characters who faced challenges requiring both individual courage and partnership cooperation. Sam's contributions to their story sessions revealed a sophisticated understanding of moral dilemmas and consequences that impressed Clara with its maturity. Even Lucy began participating through detailed illustrations that brought their fictional characters to life with remarkable artistic skill. Rose's storytelling took the form of musical narratives, combining simple melodies with words that captured emotional truths in ways that purely verbal accounts couldn't match. Her songs about missing Papa William helped the other children process their continuing grief, while her cheerful ditties about spring's eventual return provided hope during the bleakest moments of winter confinement. Timmy's attention span limited his participation in extended activities, but Clara discovered that incorporating movement and physical demonstrations into lessons kept him engaged while burning off some of his restless energy. Mathematics lessons became games involving counting steps around the house, while geography instruction used his toy animals to represent different regions and climates. The storm's fury reached its peak during the third day, when wind speeds became so extreme that venturing outside even to reach the barn posed genuine danger. Clara watched Sam struggle with the knowledge that their livestock needed care, while accepting that human safety had to take precedence. The responsible young man who had taken pride in his ability to handle adult tasks found himself forced to acknowledge the limitations imposed by circumstances beyond anyone's control. The crisis came when they discovered that the wind had damaged the barn roof, allowing snow to accumulate in the hay storage area. The threat to their winter feed supply represented more than an inconvenience. It could potentially endanger their ability to maintain the farm through the remaining winter months. Sam's frustration at being unable to address the problem immediately manifested as increased irritability with his siblings and sharp responses to Clara's attempts to maintain indoor peace. Emma recognized the source of Sam's distress and took charge of organizing a family council to address the crisis. Her proposal that they work together to develop emergency plans for various scenarios demonstrated leadership skills that reminded Clara of William's description of the girl's remarkable maturity. The family meeting allowed each child to contribute ideas for managing the barn situation while providing Sam with the support he needed to accept temporary helplessness. Lucy's contribution to the emergency planning session surprised everyone. She approached Clara with a detailed drawing that showed how blankets and canvas could be arranged to protect the hay from further snow accumulation once the storm subsided enough to allow barn access. Her diagram included measurements and structural details that revealed both practical intelligence and careful observation of the barn's construction. The twins proposed a partnership system where they would work together to move damaged hay, while Sam and Clara addressed the roofing repairs. Their plan included specific task assignments and safety protocols that demonstrated their ability to think beyond their usual synchronized activities toward practical problem-solving that utilized their individual strengths. Rose's suggestion that they create celebration rituals for successful completion of the repair work provided the emotional motivation that transformed a daunting challenge into a shared adventure. Her proposal for a special dinner and storytelling session gave everyone something to anticipate beyond simply resolving the immediate crisis. Even Timmy contributed by offering to help move smaller items and serve as the official timekeeper for work sessions. His 4-year-old enthusiasm for being included in important family business provided inspiration that reminded everyone that they were working together toward shared goals rather than simply enduring individual hardships. When the storm finally exhausted itself on the 4th day, the Hayes family emerged from their snowbound farmhouse as a more cohesive unit than they had been before the crisis. The enforced intimacy and shared challenges had revealed aspects of each personality that might have remained hidden under normal circumstances, while providing opportunities for growth and mutual support that strengthened their bonds as a family. Sam's leadership during the barn repairs demonstrated his evolution from an angry, protective boy into a responsible young man capable of directing complex projects while considering everyone's safety and capabilities. His willingness to accept help from his younger siblings showed emotional maturity that impressed Clara with its depth and authenticity. Emma's organizational skills proved invaluable in coordinating the multiple tasks required to restore the barn's functionality while maintaining household routines that kept everyone fed, warm, and productively occupied. Her ability to delegate responsibilities according to individual abilities while maintaining overall project coherence revealed natural administrative talents that suggested promising future opportunities. The twins' collaborative approach to The heavy lifting required for hay removal showcased their ability to function as an efficient team while demonstrating individual problem-solving skills that hadn't been apparent when they focused primarily on their synchronized activities. Daniel's mechanical aptitude proved crucial for rigging pulley systems that made the work manageable, while David's careful observation skills prevented several potential accidents. Lucy's artistic documentation of the repair process created a visual record that became part of the family's shared history, while demonstrating her analytical abilities and attention to detail. Her drawings captured not only the technical aspects of their work, but also the emotional satisfaction of successful collaboration, providing lasting reminders of their ability to overcome challenges together. Rose's contributions to maintaining morale during the difficult work proved as valuable as any physical assistance. Her constant encouragement, creative songs about their progress, and infectious optimism kept spirits high when fatigue and frustration might have led to conflict or discouragement. Timmy's participation, while limited by his age and size, provided essential motivation for the older children who took pride in including their youngest brother in meaningful ways. His excitement about helping with important grown-up work reminded everyone that their efforts were building something valuable for the entire family's future security. The successful completion of the barn repairs marked a turning point in Clara's relationship with her 7 children. The crisis had tested their ability to function as a family unit under extreme pressure, and their success in meeting the challenge provided confidence that they could handle whatever difficulties the future might present. Dr. Coleman's arrival, the day after the storm subsided, brought news from town that reinforced Clara's sense that her family was exactly where they belonged. Several other homesteads had suffered more severe damage, and some families had been forced to abandon their properties temporarily due to inadequate preparation for winter's severity. The Hayes family's successful weathering of the crisis, both literally and figuratively, demonstrated their resilience and practical competence. The doctor's medical examination of all 7 children revealed no ill effects from their week of confinement, and his observations about their emotional state provided reassuring confirmation that their family dynamics remained healthy despite the stress they had endured. "You've raised these children's confidence in their ability to handle adversity," he told Clara privately. "That's a gift that will serve them well throughout their lives." Pastor Sullivan's visit brought spiritual perspective to their recent experiences, framing their successful crisis management as evidence of divine providence and family strength. His sermon the following Sunday used their example to illustrate themes about community resilience and the various forms that family support could take, indirectly reinforcing community acceptance of their unconventional household structure. Martha Flynn's appearance with a wagon load of supplies demonstrated the practical support network that had developed around Clara's family during their months in Millbrook. Her offerings included not only immediate necessities like flour and lamp oil, but also small luxuries like candy for the children and fabric for Emma's sewing projects that showed genuine affection for the family's welfare. The arrival of spring brought challenges different from winter's harsh demands, but equally important for the family's long-term success. Clara discovered that managing 7 children's educational needs, social development, and individual growth trajectories required constant adaptation and creative problem-solving that kept her intellectually stimulated while emotionally fulfilled. Sam's adolescent development accelerated during the spring months, as his physical growth and increasing responsibilities on the farm combined with natural hormonal changes to create new dynamics within the family structure. Clara found herself navigating the delicate balance between acknowledging his growing maturity while maintaining appropriate boundaries and expectations for someone who was still fundamentally a child. The resolution came through frank conversations about the unique position Sam occupied as the oldest boy in a household headed by a single woman. Clara acknowledged that he would naturally assume certain male leadership roles, while ensuring that he understood these responsibilities didn't make him an adult before his time or excuse him from age-appropriate behavior and expectations. Emma's approach to her own adolescence took different forms, as her natural maturity and caretaking instincts sometimes put her in conflict with her growing awareness of her own needs and desires. Clara worked to create opportunities for Emma to experience typical teenage activities and interests, while ensuring that the girl didn't resume the overwhelming responsibilities she had carried during the period immediately following William's death. The solution involved gradually transitioning some of Emma's household management duties to Sam and the twins, while encouraging her involvement in community activities appropriate for someone her age. The church's newly formed Young Ladies' Circle provided social connections with other girls her age, while her growing reputation as a skilled seamstress created opportunities for income and independence that boosted her confidence in her own capabilities. Lucy's gradual emergence from selective mutism represented one of the most encouraging developments of the spring season. Her first spoken words in Clara's presence came during a moment of crisis when Timmy had wandered too near the creek and Lucy shouted a warning that potentially prevented a serious accident. The breakthrough seemed to release months of pent-up communication needs, and within weeks, Lucy was participating verbally in family discussions, though she remained more reserved in social situations outside the household. The twins' individual personalities became more distinct as they gained confidence in their family's stability and their own security within that structure. Daniel's mechanical interests led him toward projects involving farm equipment maintenance and improvement, while David's observational skills made him the family's unofficial weather predictor and animal behaviorist. Their continuing close relationship evolved to accommodate these individual differences while maintaining the essential connection that had sustained them through earlier losses. Rose's developmental progress, while different from conventional patterns, demonstrated consistent growth in areas that mattered for her happiness and functionality within the family structure. Her vocabulary expanded dramatically. Her social skills improved through daily interaction with her siblings, and her creative abilities found expression through music, simple crafts, and storytelling that contributed meaningfully to the household's emotional atmosphere. Timmy's growth from a confused 4-year-old mourning his father's loss into a confident 5-year-old secure in his family relationships provided daily evidence of the healing that consistent love and security could accomplish. His increasing independence and developing personality brought joy to the entire household, while demonstrating that even the youngest family members could contribute to the collective welfare through their individual growth and happiness. The first anniversary of Clara's arrival in Millbrook coincided with the final legal formalization of her guardianship arrangement, marking not only the official recognition of her family, but also the complete transformation of her own identity from desperate immigrant to respected community member. The ceremonial signing of the final papers took place in Judge Morrison's chambers, with all 7 children present as witnesses to the legal confirmation of bonds that had already been forged through daily experience and mutual commitment. Dr. Coleman's testimony for the final legal proceedings included medical documentation showing measurable improvements in all 7 children's physical health, emotional stability, and developmental progress during their year under Clara's care. His professional assessment confirmed what community observation had already established, that the Hayes family had not only survived their unconventional beginning, but thrived in ways that benefited every member. Pastor Sullivan's spiritual Assessment emphasized the family's positive contributions to community life and their demonstration of Christian values through their daily interactions and mutual support. His testimony highlighted how their example had influenced other families to consider more flexible approaches to child rearing and household management that honored individual needs while maintaining collective strength. Martha Flynn's practical testimony focused on economic aspects of the family's integration into community life, documenting their responsible financial management, productive contributions to local commerce, and reliable participation in community events and obligations. Her assessment provided evidence that the family had achieved sustainable independence rather than remaining dependent on charity or special consideration. Mrs. Brennan's presence at the final hearing represented not opposition, but rather acknowledgement that her concerns about the arrangement's viability had been addressed through successful demonstration rather than theoretical argument. A grudging admission that the Hayes family had exceeded her expectations provided validation that carried particular weight given her initial skepticism. The legal formalization coincided with practical developments that demonstrated the family's long-term viability and success. Emma's sewing business had grown into a reliable source of supplementary income, while Sam's farm management skills had improved crop yields and livestock productivity beyond what William had achieved in his final years. The twins' collaborative approach to maintenance and improvement projects had enhanced the property's value and functionality, while the younger children's development had proceeded normally despite their unconventional family structure. Clara's own transformation was perhaps the most remarkable aspect of the entire arrangement. The frightened mail-order bride who had arrived expecting to marry a stranger had evolved into a confident woman capable of managing complex household logistics, educational planning, financial administration, and emotional guidance for 7 distinct personalities with varying needs and challenges. Her skills had developed through necessity and experience rather than formal training, but the results spoke to natural abilities that her previous circumstances had never demanded or revealed. Her capacity for love had expanded to encompass not only her chosen children, but also the broader community that had accepted and supported their unconventional family. The anniversary celebration that evening brought together the various community members who had contributed to the family's success, creating a gathering that demonstrated how thoroughly the Hayes household had integrated into Millbrook's social fabric. Dr. Coleman's presence represented professional support and friendship, while Pastor Sullivan's attendance confirmed spiritual community acceptance. Martha Flynn's participation symbolized practical neighborly assistance and commercial relationships that had developed over months of mutual respect and reliability. Even Mrs. Brennan's appearance, albeit brief, acknowledged that her concerns had been addressed through performance rather than argument. The children's individual contributions to the anniversary celebration showcased their growth and development over the year while demonstrating their continued commitment to their chosen family structure. Emma's coordination of the dinner preparations revealed organizational skills that had matured from crisis management into confident household administration. Sam's management of outdoor preparations and setup showed leadership abilities that had evolved from protective defensiveness into constructive authority. The twins' collaboration on decorative elements and entertainment provided evidence of their ability to function both as a unit and as individuals with distinct talents and interests. Lucy's artistic contributions created visual celebrations of their family's journey that communicated emotional truths through beauty and creativity. Rose's musical entertainment brought joy and celebration to the gathering while showcasing abilities that had flourished under encouragement and security. Timmy's enthusiastic participation in every aspect of the celebration demonstrated the confidence and happiness that had replaced his earlier confusion and grief. His obvious security within the family structure and his natural assumption that this was simply how families were supposed to function provided evidence that their unconventional arrangement had become, for him, the normal and expected foundation of life. As the evening concluded and guests departed, Clara found herself reflecting on the extraordinary journey that had brought her from Boston's industrial grimness to this moment of celebration surrounded by 7 children who had become her chosen family. The practical challenges that had seemed insurmountable a year earlier had been resolved through determination, creativity, and mutual support that had strengthened rather than strained their relationships. The financial concerns that had worried county officials and community skeptics had been addressed through careful management, productive efforts, and the kind of resourcefulness that frontier life demanded from everyone, regardless of family structure. The educational needs of 7 children with different abilities and interests had been met through innovative approaches that honored individual learning styles while maintaining group cohesion and progress. The social challenges of raising children as a single woman in a conventional community had been overcome through demonstrated competence, consistent behavior, and the gradual recognition that love and commitment mattered more than conformity to traditional expectations. The emotional healing required by children who had experienced multiple losses had been accomplished through security, patience, and the daily reinforcement that family bonds could be chosen and maintained through mutual dedication. Standing in her kitchen, as her 7 children completed their evening routines, Clara marveled at how completely her life had been transformed by accepting responsibility for their welfare. The desperate woman who had traveled west seeking security through marriage to a stranger had instead found purpose through motherhood to 7 children who had taught her that family was created through choice rather than circumstance. The mail-order bride, who had expected to find a husband and a quiet ranch life, had instead discovered 7 children who needed exactly what she had to offer: unlimited love, fierce protection, and unwavering commitment to their collective welfare. In accepting the enormous challenge of their care, Clara had found not burden but blessing, not obligation but joy, and not mere survival, but a future filled with endless possibility and profound satisfaction. The woman who had once thought her options were limited to marriage or factory work had instead become an educator, administrator, counselor, nurse, entertainer, disciplinarian, and advocate whose skills grew daily to meet whatever challenges her chosen family might face. The transformation from fearful immigrant to confident frontier mother represented not only personal growth, but also demonstration that conventional limitations need not define anyone's potential for happiness and success. As she turned down the lamps and prepared for sleep, Clara smiled at the recognition that sometimes life's greatest gifts arrive disguised as impossible challenges, and that the courage to embrace such challenges can transform not only individual circumstances but entire definitions of what family, success, and happiness can mean. 7 children had wished for a mother who would love them unconditionally and keep them together despite every obstacle. And in fulfilling that wish, Clara had discovered the person she had always been meant to become. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.